The Galactic Council chamber stretched across 3 kilometers of polished obsidian and floating light panels. And within this vast space sat representatives from over 200 species who had conquered the stars long before humanity ever looked up at the night sky. Ambassador Yoon Seo-yeon stood at the speaking platform with her hands clasped behind her back, her face calm despite the growing tension she felt in her chest. The Council will now hear the classification report on species 7291, known as humanity, announced Grand Counselor Mythal, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence as he gestured toward the Voltorian delegation. Counselor Vethran rose from his hovering seat, his silver scales catching the artificial light as he activated the holographic display at the center of the chamber. Distinguished members of the Council, we've completed our assessment of the human species, Vethran began, his voice carrying the confident tone of someone who believed himself absolutely correct. And our findings are quite revealing. The hologram shifted to show Earth, then expanded to display human space stations and the small fleet that represented humanity's presence among the stars. Humans have existed as a spacefaring species for only 93 standard cycles, Vethran continued, and in that time, they have engaged in 0 interstellar conflicts. Murmurs rippled through the chamber, and Ambassador Yoon kept her expression neutral, even as she noticed the condescending glances from nearby delegates. Furthermore, their military presence in space is remarkably small, consisting of fewer than 50 combat-capable vessels and approximately 12,000 active soldiers, the Voltorian added with what could only be described as a smirk. Compare this to the Krelian defense force of 2 million or the Dravosi war fleet of 10,000 ships. Behind Ambassador Yoon, Captain Park Junho stood with his security detail of 12 soldiers, and though protocol demanded silence, he felt his jaw tighten at the direction this presentation was taking. Our analysis concludes that humans avoided contact with galactic civilization for decades, not out of caution but out of fear, Vethran declared. They have demonstrated a clear pattern of conflict avoidance, and their biological readings show elevated stress responses when confronted with potential violence. Lieutenant Kim Ha-na shifted slightly beside Captain Park, and he gave her a subtle signal to remain still. Therefore, the Voltorian Science Council recommends that humanity be officially classified as a combat-averse species, Vethran finished. This designation will appropriately limit their involvement in security matters and protect them from situations beyond their psychological capacity. The chamber erupted in a mixture of agreement and mild surprise, and Ambassador Yoon stepped forward to the speaking platform. Grand Counselor, I must formally protest this classification, she said, her voice steady and clear. The assessment is based on incomplete data and fundamental misunderstandings of human nature. Vethran let out a sound that served as laughter among his species. Ambassador, there is no shame in your species' disposition, he said with false kindness. Many peaceful species contribute greatly to the Council without ever engaging in combat, and your people can focus on art or agriculture or whatever pursuits suit your gentle nature. Laughter echoed from several sections of the chamber, and Ambassador Yoon felt heat rise to her cheeks. You misunderstand, she pressed on. Humans are not afraid of combat. And our history, your history on your single homeworld, is irrelevant, interrupted a Krelian delegate. What matters is your behavior on the galactic stage. And that behavior speaks clearly. Grand Counselor Mythal raised a hand for silence. The Council will vote on the classification, he announced. All in favor of designating humanity as a combat-averse species? The voting lights activated across the chamber, and the result appeared almost instantly. 847 in favor, 12 against, and 43 abstaining. The motion carries, Mythal declared. Humanity is hereby classified as combat-averse, and all associated protocols will take effect immediately. Ambassador. Yoon stood frozen for a moment before giving a stiff bow and returning to her delegation. Captain Park watched her approach, and he could see the frustration burning behind her diplomatic mask. "Captain," she said quietly, "I want you to know that I tried. I know." "Ambassador," Park replied in a low voice. But words were never going to change their minds. Lieutenant Kim leaned closer to her commander. "Sir, they just called us cowards in front of the entire galaxy," she whispered. Her fists clenched at her sides. Park placed a calming hand on her shoulder. "Let them believe what they want," he said, his eyes scanning the alien delegates who were already dismissing the human contingent from their attention. For now, Sergeant Choi Min-jun, standing at the back of their formation, spoke without moving his lips. "Permission to speak freely, Captain?" "Granted. My grandfather fought in 3 wars, and my father served 20 years in the military," Choi said quietly. "Every person in this detail has combat experience, and some of us have seen things that would break these aliens." Park nodded slowly. "I know, Sergeant, and that is precisely why we stay quiet," he replied. "Humanity learned long ago that those who boast about their strength are rarely the ones who possess it." Ambassador Yoon gathered her materials and prepared to leave the chamber. "We have a transport to catch," she announced to the group. "The Council wants us to attend trade negotiations at Border Station Keth 7, probably to keep us busy with tasks they consider appropriate for cowards." As they walked through the massive doors of the chamber, Park took one last look at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. These beings had conquered worlds, built empires, and waged wars across centuries of space travel. Yet none of them had any idea what humanity truly was. They saw the small fleet and assumed weakness. They saw the avoided conflicts and assumed fear. They never considered that perhaps humans avoided war not because they feared it, but because they remembered it too well. Captain Park turned away and followed his team into the corridor somewhere in the galaxy. Something would eventually force the truth into the light, and when that day came, the Council would learn that the most dangerous creatures were not those who rushed into battle with eager hearts. The most dangerous were those who knew exactly what they were capable of and chose restraint until they could not choose it any longer. Border Station Keth 7 floated in the darkness between 2 spiral arms of the galaxy, a massive structure of interlocking rings that served as neutral ground for species who preferred to conduct business far from prying eyes. Captain Park stood at the viewport of the human shuttle as it approached the station, and he counted at least 30 different ship designs docked at the various ports. The station houses approximately 2,000 permanent residents, Ambassador Yoon explained as she reviewed her datapad. Traders, diplomats, medical personnel, and their families from 12 different species. Lieutenant Kim Hana studied the tactical display with a slight frown. "Security looks minimal." "Ambassador," she observed, "I am seeing maybe 200 Krelian guards for a station this size. It is neutral territory." Yoon replied with a shrug. "The major powers have an agreement to leave it alone, so heavy security was never considered necessary." The shuttle docked smoothly, and the human delegation stepped onto the station for the first time. Station Commander Yilthex greeted them at the airlock, his Krelian body hunched in what might have been nervousness or simply his natural posture. "Welcome." "Welcome," he chittered, his translator working overtime to convert his rapid speech. "The Trade Council is eager to meet with your delegation, and quarters have been prepared for your comfort, Ambassador." Yoon smiled politely and followed the commander into the station. Captain Park kept his team in formation around her, their eyes constantly scanning the corridors and the alien beings who watched them. Password of humanity's new classification had spread quickly through the galaxy, and Park could see the looks of dismissal and even amusement on many faces. A group of Dravosi traders standing near a cargo bay made no effort to hide their contempt. "Look at the little cowards," one of them growled loud enough for the humans to hear. The council finally told the truth about them. Corporal Lee Yuna, the team sharpshooter, tensed beside Park. But he gave her a warning look. "Ignore them," he said quietly. "We have a job to do." The first 2 days on the station passed without incident. And Ambassador Yoon conducted her negotiations while Park's team maintained security rotations on the third day. Everything changed. Park was reviewing duty schedules in their quarters when Lieutenant Kim burst through the door. "Captain, we have a serious problem," she announced. Her face pale beneath her composure. Park was on his feet instantly. "Report." Long-range sensors just detected a Dravosi fleet approaching the station, Kim explained rapidly. 15 warships, including 2 heavy cruisers. Park felt his stomach tighten. "Raiders?" "It appears so, sir, and they are broadcasting demands for the station to surrender all cargo and valuables," Kim continued. Station Commander Yilthex is in a panic. They rushed to the command center, where chaos had already taken hold. Commander Yilthex was surrounded by frightened staff members, his multiple limbs waiting frantically as he tried to restore order. "Everyone remain calm," he kept repeating. Though his own voice was anything but calm. Ambassador Yoon pushed through the crowd to reach Park. "The Dravosi warlord Krathvax is leading the fleet," she informed him. "He is known for brutal raids and takes no prisoners from species he considers weak." "What about the Council Defense Fleet?" Park asked. Yoon's expression was grim. "I contacted them already, and the nearest patrol group is 9 hours away." "And the Dravosi?" 3 hours. The weight of those numbers settled over the command center like a funeral shroud. A Veltorian merchant nearby let out a bitter laugh. "Well, at least the humans will be the first to flee," he announced to no one in particular. "Their shuttle is fast enough to escape before the Dravosi arrive." Other aliens nodded in agreement, some already looking toward the human delegation with expectation. "Yes, the cowards should run while they can," added a Krelian trader. No one would blame them for acting according to their nature. Park felt his team gathering behind him, and he could sense their anger building like a storm. Lieutenant Kim stepped forward. "Captain, request permission to..." "Denied." Park cut her off. But his voice was not harsh. He was thinking, calculating, and remembering 2,000 civilians on this station, including children and families who had nothing to do with galactic politics or species. Classifications: 3 hours until a fleet of raiders arrived to take everything and kill anyone who resisted. 9 hours until help could possibly arrive. The math was simple and terrible. Park turned to Ambassador Yoon. "Ambassador, I need to address the station council." Yoon studied his face for a long moment, and something in his eyes made her nod without question. "Commander Yilthex," she called out. "Captain Park wishes to speak." The Krelian commander blinked in confusion, but waved a limb toward Park. "The floor is yours." "Human, though I cannot imagine what wisdom a combat-averse species could offer in this situation." Park stepped forward, and the room fell silent. He looked at the faces around him, aliens who had dismissed and mocked his people, and he felt no anger toward them, only purpose. "My team will stay," he announced, his voice cutting through the fear like a blade. "We will defend this station until the council fleet arrives." Stunned silence followed his words. Then the laughter began. 12 humans against 15 warships? A Dravosi trader howled. Against Warlord Krathvax and his hundreds of warriors? "This is suicide," Commander Yilthex sputtered. "This is madness." Park waited for the noise to die down before he spoke again. "You classified us as cowards because we avoided war," he said slowly. "But you never asked why we avoided it." He paused and let his gaze sweep across every face in the room. "We avoided war because we knew exactly what we were capable of. And we hoped we would never have to show you. The laughter faded as something in his tone reached them. 3 hours. Park continued. In 3 hours, you will see what humanity truly is. And I promise you this, you will never call us cowards again. The command center remained frozen in disbelief as Captain Park began issuing orders to his team. Lieutenant Kim, I need a complete layout of this station in the next 10 minutes, he commanded, his voice shifting into something harder and more focused than anyone had heard before. Every corridor, every junction, every maintenance shaft. Yes, sir, Kim responded instantly. Already moving toward the station's computer systems, Sergeant Choi. How much explosive material can you improvise from what we have access to? Choi's eyes gleamed with sudden intensity. Give me access to the engineering bay and the chemical storage, and I can turn this station into a nightmare for anyone trying to walk through it. You have full access, Park confirmed before turning to the rest of his team. Corporal Lee, find me elevated positions with clear sight lines to the main docking bays and medic. Oh, set up a triage point in the central hub. The humans moved with a speed and coordination that made the watching aliens take a step back. Commander Yilthex finally found his voice. Captain Park, this is impossible, he protested. 12 soldiers cannot hold a station against an invasion force. Park fixed him with a look that made the Krelian's legs buckle slightly. Commander, humans have been fighting impossible battles since before your species developed fire, Park replied. We do not expect to win through superior numbers. And we never have. He pulled up a holographic display of Earth and began scrolling through images. 300 soldiers holding a mountain pass against an army of thousands, he said, showing an ancient battlefield, a few thousand defenders against 500,000 invaders, and an island nation standing alone against an empire that conquered a continent. The images shifted to more recent conflicts, trenches, jungles, deserts, and ruined cities. Humans have fought in every environment imaginable, against every possible disadvantage, Park continued. We have won battles we should have lost and survived situations that should have killed us. Not because we were stronger or better equipped, but because we simply refused to stop. A young Krelian guard stepped forward hesitantly. How? He asked in barely a whisper. How do you keep fighting when you know you cannot win? Park turned to face him directly. Because there is always something worth fighting for, he answered. Right now, there are 2,000 people on this station, including children who have never hurt anyone. And the Dravosi will show them no mercy. He looked around the room at the frightened faces. My team and I are not heroes. And we are not special, he said. We are simply human. And humans do not abandon the innocent. The Voltorian merchant who had mocked them earlier spoke up, his voice uncertain. But the council classified you as combativerse, he stammered. The data showed that we did not seek war, Park interrupted him. It showed that we did not rush into conflicts or build massive fleets to intimidate our neighbors. But do you know why? He stepped closer to the Voltorian. Because every human alive carries the memory of what war costs, Park said quietly. We have monuments on every continent of our world dedicated to the millions who died in our conflicts. And we swore that we would not bring that horror to the stars unless we had no other choice. Lieutenant Kim returned with the station layouts, and Park immediately began analyzing the data. The Dravosi will breach through the main docking ports here and here, he noted, highlighting the entry points. They expect minimal resistance and will likely send raiding parties to secure the cargo. Base first. We can use that against them, Sergeant Choi suggested. Let them think they are walking into an easy target. Exactly, Park agreed. We will create kill zones at these 3 junctions, and Corporal Lee will provide overwatch from these positions. He assigned each member of his team to specific locations and tasks. and the humans began transforming the station. With terrifying efficiency, Sergeant Choi disappeared into the engineering section and emerged with enough improvised explosives to make the Dravosi think twice about every step they took. Corporal Lee found her positions and began calibrating her rifle for the station's artificial gravity and atmospheric conditions. Medic Otaehyun organized medical supplies and recruited volunteer assistants from among the civilian population. 2 hours passed like minutes, and the station that had been a peaceful trade hub now bristled with hidden dangers. The alien civilians watched in stunned silence as the humans worked. "I have never seen anything like this," murmured a Krelian guard to his companion. "They move like they have done this 1,000 times." "They probably have," his companion replied with a shudder. The long-range sensors began screaming warnings as the Dravosi fleet entered visual range. 15 warships arranged in an attack formation, their weapons already powering up. Captain Park gathered his team for a final briefing. "Remember your training and trust your instincts," he told them. "These Dravosi have never fought humans before, and they have no idea what they are walking into." He looked at each of them in turn. Kim with her tactical genius, Choi with his explosive creativity, Lee with her deadly precision, Oh with his steady hands, and the others who stood ready to face death without flinching. "It has been an honor serving with all of you," Park said simply. "Save the speeches for after we win." "Captain," Sergeant Choi replied with a grim smile. The communication system crackled as the Dravosi warlord broadcast his demands. "Attention border station Keth 7, growled the voice of Krathvax. "Surrender immediately, and we may allow some of you to live as slaves. But resist and we will tear this station apart and feast on your remains." Captain Park walked to the communication console and activated the response channel. Every alien on the station held their breath. "Warlord Krathvax," Park said, his voice calm and cold. "This station is under the protection of our soldiers, and we do not surrender." Laughter erupted from the Dravosi fleet. "Humans?" Krathvax snarled with amusement. "The coward species? This will be easier than I thought." Park smiled, and those who saw it felt a chill run down their spines. "Come and find out." The first Dravosi boarding craft slammed into Docking Bay 7 with enough force to shake the entire station. And within seconds, the bay doors were torn open by warriors who stood nearly 3 meters tall with scales like armor and claws, designed for killing 50 Dravosi raiders poured through the breach. Their weapons ready and their faces twisted with eager bloodlust. They found the bay empty. "Spread out and secure the corridor," ordered the squad leader, a scarred veteran named Vreth. "The cowards are probably hiding with the civilians." His warriors moved forward in a loose formation, confident in their superiority. They never saw the thin wire stretched across the corridor entrance. The explosion ripped through the first wave and sent bodies flying in every direction. And before the survivors could recover, precise shots began dropping them one by one from somewhere above. Corporal Lee Yuna worked her rifle with mechanical efficiency from her elevated position, and each pull of the trigger meant another Dravosi warrior who would never rise again. "Contact confirmed in Bay 7, she reported through her communicator. "First wave neutralized, approximately 30 hostiles remaining in the maintenance shaft below her position." 2 other human soldiers moved silently to their next ambush point. The Dravosi regrouped and charged toward the source of the gunfire. But Lee was already gone, relocated to a secondary position before they reached her original spot. "Where is she?" Vreth roared as his warriors fired at shadows. "Find the human!" A grenade rolled out of a ventilation shaft and exploded among the confused raiders on the other side of the station. Docking Bay 12 experienced a similar scene of chaos. Sergeant Choi Min-jun had spent his preparation time well. and the corridors leading from the bay had become a maze of death-pressure-triggered explosives hidden in the walls. Tripwires connected to fragmentation devices, and panels that collapsed to reveal spike traps beneath them. The Dravosi who entered through Bay 12 lost 40 warriors in the first 100 meters. "This is impossible," screamed one of the raiders as he watched his companions fall to invisible threats. "These are supposed to be cowards." A human soldier emerged from the smoke behind him and drove a combat knife through a gap in his scales before disappearing again. Captain Park coordinated the defense from a mobile command position, constantly moving to stay ahead of the enemy while directing his team through the station's communication network. Kim. Status on the northern corridors. Holding steady. "Captain," Lieutenant Kim replied between bursts of gunfire. They sent a flanking group through Section 9, but Cho and Park Jin-soo intercepted them. "Casualties?" Park Jin-soo took a hit to his leg, but he is still fighting. Park nodded grimly. His people were outnumbered nearly 30 to 1. But they were making the Dravosi pay for every meter of station they tried to claiming the civilian shelter. The aliens huddled together and listened to the sounds of battle echoing through the structure. They could hear explosions, weapons fire, and screams, but the screams were not human. A young Krelian child tugged at her mother's arm. "Are the humans dying?" she asked with wide, frightened eyes. Her mother did not know how to answer. Warlord Krathvex watched the reports from his flagship with growing rage. "What do you mean you cannot advance?" He bellowed at the holographic image of his ground commander. "There are only 12 of them." "My lord, they fight like nothing we have ever encountered," the commander replied, his voice shaking. "They appear from nowhere. They strike without warning, and they do not stop even when wounded. Then send more warriors. We have sent 200 already, and nearly half are dead or disabled." Krathvex slammed his fist against his throne. "I will handle this myself." He gathered his personal guard of 50 elite warriors, the deadliest soldiers in his fleet, and boarded a shuttle to the station. If his regular troops could not break 12 humans, he would show them how it was done. Captain Park received the alert that a new shuttle had docked and immediately recognized the threat. "Krathvex is on the station," he announced to his team. "Fall back to secondary positions and regroup at the central hub." The humans executed a fighting withdrawal, leaving more surprises for the pursuing Dravosi while conserving their remaining ammunition. When Krathvex entered the station, he found corridors littered with the bodies of his warriors, and the walls were scorched and stained with blood, both red and blue. "Find them," he ordered his elite guard. "Bring me the human leader alive and kill the rest." The hunt through the station became a deadly game of cat and mouse. But it was unclear who was the hunter and who was the prey. Krathvex's elite guards were the best the Dravosi had, but they had never faced opponents who treated every shadow as a weapon and every corner as an ambush. One by one, the elite guards fell to traps, sniper fire, and close-quarters attacks that came from impossible angles. Krath finally found Captain Park in the central hub, standing alone in the middle of the open space with his weapon lowered. "So you are the leader of these cowards," Krathvex growled as he approached, his elite guards spreading out to surround the human. "There is that word again," Park replied calmly. "You keep using it, but I do not think you understand what it means." "It means weak," Krathvex spat. "It means afraid. And it means you will die begging for mercy. Then come and kill me." Krathvex charged with a roar, and what followed was the most brutal fight of his long career. Park moved with a speed and precision that seemed impossible for a member of a combat-averse species, dodging strikes that should have killed him and landing blows that found every weakness in Krathvex's defenses. The warlord's claws tore a gash across Park's chest, but the human did not fall. He kept fighting. A blow to Park's head opened a wound above his eye, blood streaming down his face, but he did not stop. He kept fighting Krath but never encountered anything like this. A being who absorbed punishment would have broken any other species and continued as if pain meant nothing. "What are you?" Krathvex gasped as they separated. Both wounded and breathing hard, Park wiped the blood from his eyes and smiled. "I am human," he answered. "And we do not give up." The station's alarm system suddenly blared with a new signal. "Council Defense Fleet has entered the system," announced the automated voice. "All hostile vessels are ordered to stand down." Krathvex looked at Park with something he had never felt before in his centuries of conquest. Fear. This is not over. The warlord snarled as he signaled his remaining forces to retreat. Park watched him go, then collapsed to one knee as his wounds finally caught up with him. His team emerged from their positions and rushed to his side. "Captain," Lieutenant Kim called out as she reached him. "Medico, get over here." Park looked up at her and managed a weak smile. "Did we hold?" Kim nodded with tears in her eyes. "We held, sir, and the fleet is here." Park let out a long breath and finally allowed himself to feel the pain. "Good," he whispered. "That is good." 1 week after the battle at Border Station Keth 7, the Galactic Council chamber was filled to capacity for only the second time in a century. Every seat was occupied. Every floating platform was taken. And representatives from species who rarely attended had traveled vast distances to be present for this session grand. Councillor Mithal called the assembly to order with a heavy strike of his ceremonial. "Staff, the council convenes this emergency session to address the events at Border Station Keth 7, he announced, "and to hear testimony regarding the combat classification of humanity." Ambassador Yoon Seo-yeon stood at the speaking platform. But this time, she was not alone. Beside her stood Captain Park Junho, his wounds still bandaged, but his posture straight and proud. And behind them stood the surviving members of his team. Chamber fell absolutely silent. Councillor Vethron rose from his seat. And for the first time since anyone could remember, the Veltorian looked uncertain. "Before we proceed," he said slowly, "I wish to present the testimonies gathered from survivors of the station." The holographic display activated, and face after face appeared. Aliens from a dozen different species who had witnessed what happened. Krelian trader spoke first. "I thought they would run," he admitted, his voice shaking. "When the Dravosi came, I was certain the humans would be the first to flee. But instead they stood between us and death." A Veltorian merchant appeared next, the same one who had mocked the humans before the battle. "I watched a human soldier take a wound that would have killed any of us," he said quietly. "And she kept fighting. She kept protecting us. And she never stopped until the last Dravosi was driven back." Testimony after testimony filled the chamber, and each one painted the same picture: 12 human soldiers against 300 Dravosi warriors. 6 hours of brutal combat, and a victory that should have been impossible. The young Krelian child, who had asked if the humans were dying, appeared on the display, her mother holding her close. "The humans saved us," the child said simply. They were brave. When the testimonies ended, Grand Councilor Mithal turned to Ambassador Yoon. "Ambassador, does your delegation wish to address the council?" Yoon stepped forward, but then she paused and looked at Captain Park. "Grand Councilor, I believe Captain Park should speak for humanity today," the council murmured in surprise. And Mithal nodded his approval. Park walked to the center of the speaking platform. His boots echoing in the silent chamber, he looked out at the assembled representatives, beings who had dismissed his species as cowards. And he felt no anger, only a deep and heavy sadness. "1 week ago, you watched us fight," he began. "You saw what humans can do when we have no other choice. And I can see in your eyes that you are afraid of us now." He paused and let those words settle. "But I want you to understand something important," he continued. "What you saw was not what makes humanity special, and it is not what makes us proud. The chamber seemed to lean forward, hanging on his every word. "We are not proud of how well we kill," Park said quietly. "We are not proud of how much pain we can endure or how creative we can be in destroying our enemies." He looked down at his bandaged hands. "Humanity's greatest achievement is not our capacity for war," he said. "It is the fact that we chose to leave it behind. Your ancestors conquered worlds because they could," Park told the assembled council. "You built empires and measured your worth in the species you defeated. But humans measured their worth differently." He activated the holographic display behind him, showing Earth. "We fought each other for thousands of years," he explained. "We killed millions of our own kind in wars that accomplished nothing. And we came to the edge of destroying ourselves completely." The images shifted to show monuments, memorials, and museums dedicated to the victims of human conflicts. "But we stopped," Park continued. "Not because we became weak, and not because we lost the ability to fight, but because we decided that there had to be a better way." He looked directly at Counselor Vethron. "You saw our small fleet and assumed we were afraid," Park said. "But the truth is that we were trying to be better than we were. And we hoped that the galaxy would give us the chance to prove that war was not necessary." The Voltorian could not meet his eyes. "Warlord Krathvex called us cowards because we did not seek conflict." Park continued, "But I ask you this, which requires more courage? Starting a war or choosing to end one?" He stepped back and gestured to his team. "These soldiers stood with me against impossible odds. And every one of them knew they might die," Park said. "They did not fight because they loved violence. And they did not stay because they wanted glory." Lieutenant Kim stepped forward, her arm in a sling. "We stayed because there were children on that station," she said clearly. "We stayed because innocent people needed protection. And we stayed because that is what it means to be human." Sergeant Choi nodded beside her. "Our ancestors built weapons capable of destroying our entire planet," he added, "and then they chose to never use them. Not because they could not, but because they understood the cost." The council sat in stunned silence as the weight of those words sank in. Grand Counselor Mithal finally spoke. "Counselor Vethron, in light of this testimony, do you wish to revise your species assessment?" Vethron stood slowly, and for a long moment he simply looked at the humans before him. The Voltorian Science Council formally withdraws its classification of humanity as combativerse, he announced. "Our analysis was fundamentally flawed, and we failed to understand the difference between avoiding war and fearing it." He bowed his head toward Captain Park. "Humans do not avoid combat because they cannot fight," he continued. "They avoid it because they have already learned what war truly costs. And they choose peace not from weakness, but from wisdom." "I propose a new classification," Vethron said, his voice strengthening. "Humanity shall be designated as an apex combat species. Self-restrained." The vote was unanimous as the session concluded. Representatives from dozens of species approached the human delegation, no longer with dismissal or amusement, but with respect and even admiration. A Dravosi diplomat, one who had opposed Krathvex for years, knelt before Captain Park. "My people have fought across the galaxy for centuries," he said, "and we have never met a species that chose restraint over conquest. Teach us." Park helped him to his feet. "That is all we ever wanted," he replied. "To show the galaxy that strength means nothing without the wisdom to use it well." That night, Captain Park stood alone at a viewport in the human embassy. Watching the stars, Ambassador Yoon found him there. "You changed history today," she said softly. "The Council will never look at humanity the same way." Park nodded slowly. "I just hope they remember the right lesson," he replied. "Not how well we can fight, but why we choose not to." He placed his hand against the viewport, looking toward the distant light of Earth's sun. "My grandfather used to say that the mark of a true Warrior is not how many battles they win, Park said, but how many they prevent. Yoon stood beside him. And today? Today, we could not prevent a battle, Park answered. So we won it instead. But tomorrow we go back to the real work. And what is that? Park smiled, and for the first time since the battle, he looked truly at peace. Building a galaxy where our children never have to fight at all.